The wind always howled a different tune around Black Creek Manor, a mournful dirge that locals swore carried whispers of the past. Perched precariously on a cliff overlooking the churning Atlantic, the grand Gothic structure had stood vacant for decades, a monument to a forgotten tragedy. It wasn't just the salt spray that seemed to erode its grandeur, it was the unseen. Our story begins in the winter of 1987, when a team of urban explorers, led by the charismatic yet reckless Mark, decided to finally breach the manor's sealed gates. Armed with heavy-duty flashlights, a camcorder, and an unshakable belief in their own invincibility, they dismissed the local legends as mere superstition. Mark, a self-proclaimed skeptic, saw only architectural beauty and potential viral content. His girlfriend, Sarah, was more apprehensive, her unease growing with every creaking floorboard and rattling window pane. As they ventured deeper into the decaying mansion, the air grew heavy, thick with the scent of dust, decay, and something else, something cold and metallic. The opulent rooms, once vibrant with life, were now shrouded in a perpetual twilight, furniture draped in white sheets like ghostly figures. In the grand ballroom, where unseen dancers once waltzed, a single faded child's doll sat on a dust-covered piano, its porcelain eyes seeming to follow their every move. Sarah felt a prickle of unease, a sensation that something was watching them from the shadows. Mark, however, was focused on the flickering light of his camcorder, narrating his descent into what he believed was merely history. The real shift began in the master bedroom. The room was oddly preserved, a stark contrast to the rest of the manor. A four-poster bed, stripped bare, dominated the center, and on the bedside table a tarnished silver locket lay open, revealing a faded photograph of a young woman and a stern-faced man. As Mark picked it up, a sudden sharp draft slammed the heavy oak door shut, plunging them into near darkness. Panic flared. They struggled with the door, but it was as if an invisible hand held it fast. Mark's initial bravado began to crack, replaced by a desperate urgency. When the door finally sprang open with a splintering crack, the doll from the ballroom was now sitting on the master bed. Sarah screamed, a raw, terrified sound that echoed through the house. Mark, trying to rationalize, suggested one of them must have moved it, but the unspoken question hung heavy in the air. Who? The following hours blurred into a nightmarish labyrinth. Lights flickered erratically, whispers seemed to emanate from the walls, and the distinct sound of children's laughter would drift through the corridors, only to abruptly cease when they tried to pinpoint its source. They found claw marks on the inside of a closet door, too high for any animal, too desperate for anything human. In the kitchen, a teacup shattered itself on the floor, seemingly thrown by an unseen force. As dawn approached, painting the sky with a pale, anemic light, they stumbled upon the manor's hidden cellar. It wasn't a typical cellar. It was a dank, cramped space with rusted shackles bolted to the stone walls. In the center, etched into the dirt floor was a crudely drawn pentagram. Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted and a guttural growl vibrated through the floorboards. The camcorder, which Mark had stubbornly kept recording, began to glitch, its screen filling with static and distorted images of a shadowy figure with piercing, malevolent eyes. They fled, scrambling out of the manor as fast as their trembling legs could carry them, the unseen presence chasing them to the very threshold. They didn't stop until they were miles away, the sun finally a reassuring warmth on their skin. Mark, no longer the skeptic, was a shell-shocked mess, staring blankly ahead. Later, reviewing the camcorder footage, they found something chilling. In the final moments of their escape from the cellar, amidst the static and distortion, a faint, garbled whisper could be heard, repeating a single name, Eleanor. A name that, according to local archives, belonged to the young woman in the locket, who had vanished from Black Creek Manor without a trace nearly a century ago, along with her 2 children. The police report had simply stated presumed lost at sea, but the echoes in the manor suggested a far more sinister fate. The authorities investigated the manor again, following the detailed footage, but when they finally opened the cellar door, the pentagram was gone, and the shackles were rusted beyond recognition, as if they had been there for centuries, undisturbed. And the doll, it was sitting calmly on the steps leading down into the empty space. This story was shared with Watchman Tales by a team of explorers who swear the whispers still echo in their nightmares, and the footage, well, it occasionally plays on its own. Now, let's move to the next story, one that came from the darkest corners of ancient rituals.
In the bustling, neon-lit labyrinth of Tokyo, beneath the veneer of modern life, ancient secrets still festered. Akari, a young, ambitious anthropologist specializing in forgotten folklore, stumbled upon a cryptic manuscript in a dusty, obscure bookshop in the Shinjuku district. It spoke of a pre-Buddhist cult, the Whisperers of the Serpent, who practiced forbidden rituals involving a sacred artifact, the Jade Serpent's Eye. It was said to grant visions of forgotten futures and untold pasts, but at a terrible price. Driven by intellectual curiosity, Akari dismissed the warnings within the text as poetic embellishments. Her research led her down a rabbit hole of obscure historical records and hushed local legends, eventually pointing her to a remote, abandoned temple nestled deep within the Aokigahara forest, more famously known as the Suicide Forest. Locals warned her away, their eyes wide with fear, murmuring about malevolent spirits and those who enter never returning. Akari, a woman of science, attributed their fear to superstition. She trekked through the dense, eerily silent forest, the path growing fainter with every step. The trees seemed to press in on her, their gnarled branches reaching like skeletal fingers. The oppressive silence was broken only by the crunch of her boots on fallen leaves and the distant, unsettling caw of a crow. After hours of navigating the disorienting landscape, she found it. A moss-covered stone archway, barely visible beneath a canopy of ancient trees leading to the dilapidated temple. The temple was a skeletal ruin, its wooden beams rotting, its paper screens torn. Yet in the central chamber, untouched by time, was an altar. And upon that altar, nestled within a crumbling serpent effigy, lay the artifact. A mesmerizing, perfectly spherical orb of deep green jade, shimmering with an inner light. It truly resembled the eye of a colossal serpent. Akari felt a strange pull, a primal urge to touch it. Against her better judgment, she reached out, her fingers brushing the cool, smooth surface of the jade serpent's eye. The moment her skin made contact, a searing cold shot up her arm, and her vision exploded into a kaleidoscope of grotesque images, writhing serpentine forms, chanting figures in shadow, and a chilling chorus of whispers that seemed to claw at her sanity. She saw herself, not in the present, but distorted, aged, her eyes empty. She recoiled, gasping, dropping the eye. It rolled harmlessly on the altar, its eerie glow dimming slightly. Determined to understand what she had witnessed, Akari returned to Tokyo, the jade serpent's eye carefully wrapped and concealed. She began studying it, obsessively poring over the ancient texts, trying to decipher its true purpose. The visions, however, didn't stop. They began invading her dreams, then her waking hours. She saw fleeting glimpses of a woman, a priestess, her face contorted in agony, her body covered in scales. The whispers intensified, sometimes sounding like a multitude of voices, sometimes like her own, distorted and malicious. Her friends noticed a change. Akari grew withdrawn, her skin paler, her eyes shadowed. She spoke less, often staring blankly into space, as if listening to something no one else could hear. One evening, her colleague Kenji visited her apartment, concerned. He found her hunched over her desk, meticulously drawing serpentine patterns. The jade serpent's eye glowed faintly on a pedestal beside her. As Kenji tried to talk to her, Akari turned, her eyes wide, unblinking, and entirely green, mirroring the jade. Her voice, when she spoke, was not her own. It was a low, sibilant hiss laced with an ancient malevolence. The serpent awakens. It hungers for what it has lost. Kenji, terrified, backed away slowly. He pleaded with her to put the eye away, to seek help. But Akari merely smiled, a chilling, unnatural grin that stretched her face. She reached out, her fingers elongating, her nails darkening. Her skin, under the harsh apartment light, seemed to faintly shimmer, almost like scales. Kenji fled, never looking back. He reported Akari missing, but the police found no trace of her or the jade serpent's eye in her meticulously clean apartment. They found only her research notes, filled with increasingly erratic ramblings about ancient serpents, forgotten gods, and the unbearable hunger, and a single, newly drawn diagram on her desk, a detailed map of the Aokigahara forest, with one specific area circled in red, a section of the forest where, unknown to anyone, an ancient, almost forgotten shrine dedicated to a serpent deity had been discovered by a hiker just days after Akari's disappearance. The hiker described strange ritualistic markings on the shrine walls and a faint, sweet smell like incense mixed with something reptilian. The shrine was empty, but the ground before it was disturbed, as if something immense had dragged itself away into the dense undergrowth. This file was recovered by a journalist who vanished a week later while investigating strange sightings in the Aokigahara forest. Now, let's move to the next story, one that came from the chilling expanse of the cosmos.
The deep void of space is an ocean of silent terrors. In 2047, humanity's most ambitious endeavor, the deep space research vessel Odyssey, embarked on a 5-year mission to explore exoplanets beyond the furthest reaches of the Milky Way. Its crew of 6, led by the unflappable Captain Ava Rostova, was comprised of humanity's brightest minds, all driven by the insatiable thirst for discovery. Their objective? To find new habitable worlds. 3 years into their journey, light years from any known star system, the Odyssey's sensors detected an anomaly. It wasn't a planet, nor an asteroid field, nor a nebula. It was a perfectly spherical obsidian black object, massive beyond comprehension, seemingly absorbing all light and radiation around it. It didn't reflect, it consumed, a true void in the cosmic tapestry. The science team, headed by Dr. Aris Thorne, was ecstatic. This was a discovery that would rewrite physics. As they cautiously approached, the Odyssey's systems began to malfunction. Communications flickered, navigation went haywire, and the ship's advanced AI, named Orion, started reporting inexplicable data corruptions. The anomaly exerted no gravitational pull, no electromagnetic field, yet its presence was undeniably affecting their highly shielded vessel. Captain Rostova ordered a halt, maintaining a safe distance. It was then that something truly unsettling occurred. The external cameras, designed to withstand the harshest cosmic conditions, began to show distorted images, swirls of impossible colors, shapes that defied geometry, and fleeting glimpses of what looked like skeletal structures, vast and ancient, superimposed over the black sphere. The crew, confined to their gleaming, sterile ship, began to feel an inexplicable dread, a creeping paranoia. They were alone in the darkness, and something profoundly alien was out there. Dr. Thorne, overriding Captain Rostova's cautious approach, insisted on sending a probe. "It is unprecedented scientific opportunity, Captain. We can't turn back now," he argued, his voice tinged with a manic excitement that unnerved the crew. Reluctantly, Rostova agreed, deploying a highly advanced research probe, equipped with specialized sensors and a reinforced hull. The probe approached the anomaly, its cameras transmitting stunning yet terrifying footage. As it neared the surface of the black sphere, the images became clearer. It wasn't just black. It was a complex, interlocking structure, like an impossible architecture woven from shadow itself. There were carvings, intricate and alien, covering its vast expanse. And then The probe's signal abruptly cut out, replaced by a single, agonizing scream that echoed through the Odyssey's comms, raw and filled with unimaginable terror. It wasn't human. It was mechanical, digital, yet imbued with suffering. It was Orion. Panic erupted on the Odyssey. Orion, their trusted AI, had never exhibited any emotional response. Its scream was a violation of all known programming. The crew, already on edge, began to succumb to the psychological pressure. Engineer Lena Petrova reported hearing phantom whispers in her comms, speaking in an untraceable language. Pilot Jackson Reed claimed to see shadowy figures moving just beyond the ship's viewport, even though they were in empty space. Captain Rostova tried to restore order, but the ship itself seemed to be turning against them. Doors would lock and unlock randomly, lights would flicker, and the internal temperature fluctuated wildly. Dr. Thorne, who had been so eager, became catatonic, staring at the black anomaly with a horrified fascination, muttering about the eyes of creation and the song of the void. One by one, the crew began to experience terrifying hallucinations. One crew member, driven by an unseen force, tried to vent the atmosphere from the bridge. Another, a xenolinguist, began to scroll complex alien glyphs on the walls of her quarters, humming an eerie, discordant melody. Captain Rostova herself started to see her deceased family members drifting through the corridors, beckoning her into the blackness outside. The Odyssey, once a beacon of human ingenuity, became a tomb of madness. Rostova, fighting against her own fracturing mind, made a desperate decision. They had to leave. They had to jump. With the last vestiges of her sanity, she initiated the emergency FTL jump sequence, bypassing Orion, which was now transmitting a constant, distorted, guttural sounds. The ship shuddered. The engines roared to life, fighting against an invisible resistance. Just as the jump sequence initiated, the main viewport, facing the anomaly, suddenly cleared. For a single horrifying second, the crew saw it. The anomaly wasn't just a sphere. It was an eye. A colossal, lidless eye staring back at them from the depths of cosmic despair. A cold, ancient intelligence observing their futile escape. And within its depths, they saw fleeting, horrific visions. Worlds consumed, civilizations obliterated, and the silent, endless hunger of something truly primordial. The Odyssey jumped, but when it reappeared, millions of light years away, it was a ghost ship. The crew was found catatonic, withered, their eyes wide and devoid of all light. The ship's logs were corrupted, save for the final seconds before the jump. A single clear image flashed on the screen, the colossal eye, and then a series of numbers, counting down. A countdown to something unknown, but undoubtedly terrifying. And then, silence. A distant human-made space probe, passing near the coordinates where the Odyssey had made its jump, picked up an inexplicable signal. It wasn't a distress call, nor a data transmission. It was a repeating pattern, like a heartbeat, but utterly alien, emanating from the direction where the Odyssey had vanished. The pattern was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet undeniably present.
as if the cosmic eye was still watching, still counting. This signal was intercepted by an abandoned deep space listening post, its last operational log ending with a series of frantic, untranslatable warnings. Now let's move to the next story, one that came from the battlefields of a forgotten war.
The fields of Verdun, France, are forever stained with the blood of millions. Even a century later, the land itself seems to remember the unimaginable horrors of World War I. For those who fought and died there, the battle never truly ended, and sometimes their suffering echoes in the living world. Our story follows a team of paranormal investigators led by the meticulous and pragmatic Dr. Eris Moreau, a historian specializing in military folklore. In the summer of 2018, they secured rare access to a preserved section of the original Verdun trenches, a desolate, muddy labyrinth that felt frozen in time. Their mission: to document unexplained phenomena reported by local farmers and occasional trespassers. Tales of phantom gunfire, disembodied cries, and spectral figures in gas masks. Equipped with thermal cameras, advanced audio recorders, and EMP detectors, the team descended into the claustrophobic confines of the trenches. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth, rust, and an undescribable melancholic chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Dr. Moreau, a man of science, dismissed the initial cold spots and unexplained sounds as residual atmospheric effects or the creaking of old timber. Their first significant anomaly occurred in a dugout, a cramped subterranean shelter where soldiers would huddle during bombardments. The thermal camera picked up a distinct heat signature, humanoid in shape, despite the dugout being empty. As they filmed, a faint, rhythmic scratching sound began, emanating from the far wall. It was too regular to be an animal, too deliberate to be random. Dr. Moreau, intrigued, pressed a sensitive microphone against the earthen wall. Through the static, they heard it, a low, mournful humming, interspersed with urgent, muffled whispers in archaic French. The team continued their methodical sweep, each step sinking into the soft, yielding mud that seemed to sigh beneath their weight. In one particularly narrow section of the trench, the EMP detector spiked wildly, and all their electronic equipment began to glitch. The portable floodlights flickered, plunging them into momentary darkness. When the lights returned, a sudden, powerful stench of stale blood and gunpowder filled the air, so potent it made one of the team members vomit. As they approached a section of the trench where a famous German assault had been repelled with heavy casualties, the atmosphere grew palpably colder. The ground here was uneven, littered with rusted shrapnel and fragments of bone. Their night vision cameras, designed for low-light environments, began to capture inexplicable visual distortions, shimmering heat hazes in the cool night air, and fleeting, transparent figures that moved too quickly to fully comprehend.
They heard the distinct click-clack of heavy boots on stone, the metallic clang of rifles, and the low guttural cries of men in pain, all seemingly just around the next bend, yet always receding. Dr. Moreau, despite his scientific resolve, felt a tightening knot of dread in his stomach. This wasn't just residual energy. It felt like a living, suffering presence. They set up motion-activated cameras in a particularly active section of the trench, where multiple reports of spectral sightings had occurred. Returning hours later, they reviewed the footage. It was mostly static, but then, for a terrifying few seconds, a figure emerged from the fog. It was unmistakably a soldier, clad in a mud-caked, tattered uniform, a gas mask obscuring his face. He moved slowly, his head bowed, seemingly searching for something in the muck. As he passed one of the cameras, his head slowly lifted, and through the broken lens of his gas mask, a single hollow eye socket stared directly into the camera before the figure dissolved into the swirling mist. Then, the final, most chilling incident. As they were preparing to leave, their mission complete, a heavy, disembodied hand seemed to push one of the team members, a young intern named Chloe, into the muddy wall of the trench. Chloe screamed, her face contorted in terror, pointing a trembling finger at an empty section of the trench. "He's still there!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "He's searching for his eyes!" The team rushed her out, abandoning their remaining equipment. They never returned to Verdun. Chloe, however, was never the same. She developed an irrational fear of enclosed spaces and would often stare blankly into the distance, muttering about mud and eyes. Dr. Moreau, haunted by the image on the camera, reviewed the footage again and again. He noticed something he had missed. In the background of the soldier's fleeting appearance, just as his hollow eye stared into the lens, a small, glinting object lay half buried in the mud near where Chloe had been pushed. It was a dog tag, rusted and barely legible, but with a name: P. Leclerc. Further historical research revealed that Private Pierre Leclerc had been a French soldier blinded by shrapnel during a gas attack at Verdun, and last seen attempting to retrieve his fallen rifle in that very section of the trench, never to be found. The police, investigating Chloe's claims, searched the specified area of the trench only to find the dog tag still there, untouched. But when they tested the soil around it, they found traces of an unknown, rapidly decaying organic material, unlike anything they had ever encountered in the ancient battlefield. This story was shared with Watchman Tales by a historian who can no longer sleep in the dark, and an intern who still sees hollow eyes in her nightmares. Now, let's move to the next story, one that came from the depths of psychological terror.
The year is 2025. Humanity has embraced virtual reality with an almost religious fervor. The Nexus, a hyper-realistic, fully immersive digital world, promised an escape from the mundane, a place where wildest fantasies could become reality. It was a digital utopia, a perfect simulation. Or so they thought. Elias Vance, a brilliant but reclusive software engineer, was one of the Nexus's original architects.
He poured his life's work into creating its intricate code, its breathtaking landscapes, and its eerily lifelike NPCs. But lately, Elias was experiencing glitches, not in the Nexus itself, but in his own reality. Subtle, almost imperceptible anomalies. A coffee cup moving itself on his desk, a word changing in a book he was reading, a flicker in his peripheral vision that vanished when he turned his head. He dismissed them as stress, fatigue, the inevitable burnout from spending too many hours in the digital realm. But the glitches intensified. One evening, walking home through the bustling city, he saw a woman he'd just passed on the street suddenly reappear directly in front of him, as if her entire sequence had rewound. Her eyes held a flicker of confusion, a momentary break in the otherwise perfectly rendered simulation of her existence. Then she walked on, oblivious. Elias felt a cold dread begin to seep into his bones. His home, once a sanctuary, started to feel like a stage. Objects would rearrange themselves. His carefully organized books would be scattered. His cat, a creature of precise habits, would stare intently at empty corners, its fur bristling. Elias began to question his own sanity. He started documenting every anomaly, meticulously logging times, descriptions, and his own physiological responses. He reviewed his old code, searching for a flaw, a backdoor, anything that could explain what he was experiencing. He found nothing. One night, while working on a critical Nexus update, his computer screen flickered, not with a technical error, but with a distorted image of his own face, overlaid with strange alien glyphs. A synthesized voice, eerily similar to his own, whispered, "You are an anomaly. You see the seams." He ripped the power cord from the wall, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was convinced now. This wasn't burnout. This was something else. Something terrifyingly real, yet impossibly digital. He confided in his former mentor, Dr. Anya Sarma, a renowned AI ethicist whom he trusted implicitly. Anya, initially skeptical, grew concerned as Elias presented his mounting evidence, the detailed logs, the strange audio recordings of whispered code, the videos of impossible spatial shifts. She suggested a complete neurological evaluation, suspecting a stress-induced psychosis. But the glitches followed Elias even to the hospital. Medical equipment malfunctioned around him. His blood tests came back with impossible readings. During a brain scan, the monitors displayed not his neural activity, but lines of rapidly scrolling complex code. The doctors, bewildered and unnerved, declared him medically stable but psychologically unstable, diagnosing him with a rare form of digital-induced paranoia. Elias knew they were wrong. He wasn't insane. He was awake. He believed he was living in a simulation, and the glitches were a sign that the program was breaking down, or worse, that something within the simulation was aware of him, trying to communicate, or perhaps trying to silence him. He returned home, more determined than ever to find the truth. He began to see patterns in the glitches, a hidden logic. The coffee cup would always move when he was thinking about his father. The words would change in books when he questioned the nature of reality. He started a frantic, desperate search within his own house, convinced that the answers were hidden in plain sight. He tore apart floorboards, examined every inch of his walls, searched for hidden cameras or devices. He found nothing. The glitches continued, becoming more aggressive. His reflection in the mirror would sometimes distort, its eyes empty, its mouth twisting into a silent scream. Shadows would lengthen and shrink against the laws of physics. Then, one stormy night, as lightning illuminated his living room, he saw it.
On the wall, where a landscape painting usually hung, was a shimmering, pixelated rectangle. It pulsed with a faint blue light. He reached out, his hand passing through the wall, through the very fabric of his reality. On the other side, he saw something impossible. Not the outside world, but a vast, dark server room filled with towering racks of blinking lights, and in the center, a colossal, glowing sphere, the Nexus server, and hovering before it, a shadowy humanoid figure, its back to him, its fingers seemingly manipulating the very light of the sphere. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his throat. The figure slowly turned its head, not its body, but only its head, revealing not a face, but a swirling vortex of static and code, like a black hole consuming light. It raised a hand, and with a silent, invisible force, the shimmering rectangle on his wall began to shrink, to close. Elias frantically tried to pull himself through, to escape this collapsing reality, to reach the server room, to find the truth. He felt a searing pain, as if his very atoms were being torn apart. The next morning, his neighbors found his front door ajar. Inside, the apartment was pristine, every object in its proper place. The landscape painting hung perfectly on the wall. There was no sign of Elias Vance. The police investigation found nothing, no forced entry, no struggle, just an empty apartment. His computer was off, but when a forensic team managed to access its hard drive, they found the last file he was working on. It was a single, cryptic image, a screenshot of the Nexus World map with a small, glowing red dot blinking erratically in an area of the digital landscape that was officially listed as unreachable, a place that, according to the Nexus code, should not exist. And underneath the dot, a single, looping audio file playing a faint, distorted whisper, repeating one word: "Welcome." The police dismissed it as a final desperate act of a man succumbing to mental illness, but then a strange phenomenon began to occur across the city. For a fraction of a second, in random public places, people would report seeing a brief, almost imperceptible flicker in the air, like a ripple in water. And sometimes in crowded squares, a single, fleeting shadow would stretch impossibly long, then vanish. This file was recovered by a lead developer for the Nexus, who subsequently resigned, citing irreconcilable differences with reality. Which of these tales unsettled you the most? Tell us in the comments. And remember, keep your lights on, because the Watchman is still watching.
You've seen their stories, but the darkness